It's time for Color Quickie, which means it's time to investigate a paint color, go into some of the ways that I would use it in my home, and maybe ways you can use it in yours. And then finally, we'll go through an entire color palette that I've put together, that I've concocted for all my viewers. Thanks for liking and subscribing. Let's get into this video. So vintage mauve, or mauve, depending on who you ask. Let's ask Google, how do you pronounce this word?
Mauve.
Okay, that settles it. What we're looking at today is vintage mauve, which is a Behr paint color that sort of has a mauve-like red undertone feel, but ultimately it's giving me more of a taupe coloration with just a little bit of that mauve hiding in the background. I would call it a pretty muted color, all things considered, and even Behr Paint themselves lists it in their neutral color category. That gives you an idea of how passive and desaturated it really feels in person. Don't get me wrong, this isn't just brown and gray mixed like most taupe colors are. There is a little bit of that reddish, almost purple undertone that's present. So just keep that in mind. It's not completely neutral, completely gray. There is some coloration to it, which I think makes it a little more fun, all things considered. Going back to the Behr Paint website, we can take a look at the light reflectance value, or the LRV, and this is a number between 0 and 100. I sort of look at it as a lightness score. The higher the number, the lighter the color will appear because it's reflecting a higher percentage of light. And this color scores a 44 out of 100, so slightly lower than completely middle of the pack. I would call it a mid-tone paint color, and this is sort of a good thing and a bad thing when it comes to color choice and color selection. Good because there's enough to it where it's gonna be noticeable. It's not going to be a completely blah color that's just gonna completely dissolve away when you use it inside your home. It has some richness to it, so it will be noticed for better or worse. And that's, I guess, the negative of it. If you are looking for a color that has some lightness and airiness and you want to make your space as bright as possible, this color won't really do a great job at that. And that's why I would categorize it as a secondary neutral color. So just because it isn't completely vibrant doesn't mean it's extremely versatile in a lot of situations. It gets even more confusing when you look at some of the similar colors that Behr lists alongside it. You see a lot of oranges and peaches, especially in the lighter range. But once you get to the darker colors that are comparable, that's where you can see some crossover. You can see some of that gray coming in, that brown, that red, all coming together. So essentially, the vintage part of mauve is kind of like a taupe aspect. So it's maybe a mauve that has been coated with layers and layers of grease and grime and dust that has sort of made it less vibrant. The mauve is very much in the background here. And because this color is darker and maybe not as flexible as I like my colors to be, I put some other colors around it that have that versatility, that universality that a lot of people like with their paint colors. First one being Timid White, a much brighter color. It has an 80 LRV, so you could describe this as an off-white. I mean, some people might just think it's white when you look at it on walls, for example, but I think it works quite nicely with vintage mauve because it has this subtle warmth to it, but not from a yellow or even kind of a gold aspect. It's more so that sort of mauve-like warmth. And what I mean by that is you have a tiny bit of red, maybe a touch of brown, like a very, very light taupe almost. And this gives the color a kind of effervescent, sort of bubbly, sparkling quality, maybe a tiny peachy in certain situations, maybe a touch rosy, but it's very, very subtle. There's very little colorant that goes into colors like this, so you won't see anything too dramatic and vibrant when it comes to actual hue, actual color. Put it next to vintage mauve and the two just blend together really, really nicely. You obviously have a ton of contrast, but the undertones are quite similar, and that's why I picked it in this case. Timid White is going to be a great main color choice for the people that are looking for something really bright and vibrant. But if you don't want to go too bright, maybe a little bit different coloration-wise, Campfire Ash would be my next choice. And this one has an LRV of 69, so it's just a bit darker than Timid White, quite a bit lighter than Vintage Mauve. So it does split the difference in terms of how dark/light it is, but also what you get here is a muted greeny color. You have a bit more of that green present. It's definitely the most present undertone in the color, but the green is still passive and natural. It doesn't feel forced. Like it's sort of a khaki color, maybe a little bit of a beigey green, a greenish perhaps. But there is enough gray to soften the color altogether, putting it in the neutral color category as well. So nothing too polarizing here. A tiny bit complementary to the red undertone found in mauve and mauve adjacent colors that we've been talking about, but not enough to make it too polarizing. So I would use these in similar spaces, or you can have them as different room colors within the overall palette. And then finally, the third color pairing, the kind of accent choice here is blue fur. Beautiful, beautiful, dark bluey green. I would say it favors green over blue, but there is enough between them to have it sort of feel different depending on your lighting. So you throw some warm incandescent lighting, you'll see a lot more of that green. But if you have a lot of cool light coming in, either through your north-facing windows or your overhead lighting, you may see a little more of that blue. But either way, I just love how this color looks with the others. Great accent color for things like kitchen cabinets, if you want to go a little crazy and wild there. If you want to do something like an accent wall or an accent room, like a dining room or your powder room, those are some of the more popular rooms to spice up with your colors, and I think blue fur does a great job at that. Now we got to talk about trim colors, so your baseboards, your doors, and your frames. If we're talking white, there is no whiter than Ultra Pure White by Behr Paint. And for this palette, I like it because it's extremely stark and crisp, and it's gonna look brand new and clean. Really, really easy choice for a lot of people. If you want something darker and a little more moody, dramatic, interesting, fun, Medieval Wine would be my choice. Definitely inspired by that bit of mauve in Vintage Mauve, but what you end up here is a dark, purpley wine red almost. It is technically part of the red family, so there is a lot of that happening, but clearly we got some Welch's grape juice mixed in here too. Also a really dramatic interaction between blue fur and Medieval Wine as wall and trim colors. I feel like that's a very artsy choice, but kind of like the look of it a lot, so I thought I would share it with you all. Here's the palette all together. Let me know what you think. If you've made it this far, you can become a channel member by clicking that join button, and it just further supports what we do on this channel, full-time on YouTube and beyond. Here's another video if you want more color, more fun.